You're good to go, Interim Chair James.
All right, thank you, Rita, and thanks everybody for being here. Just want to go ahead and get started. And first I want to say welcome to everybody. And we have a new member I'm looking at, Jeff Knoll, the new Cabinet Secretary for Economic Development for the state of Kentucky. I just want to welcome you on board as you've taken Larry Hayes' spot. So welcome aboard. We're glad to have you on board.
Looking forward to working with everybody. Thank you very much.
And then next, Rita, could you call the roll, please?
Yes, I will. J. Michael Brown,
Present.
Alicia Burns,
Present.
Gina Dunlap,
Present.
Jennifer Hancock,
Here.
Tammy Hawkins,
Present.
Devon Holt, Dr. Gabe Jones, Jr.,
Here.
David Kaplan, Dr. Mary Milliner, Michael Nagel,
Nagel, present.
sorry. Christopher Romaine, Desmond Smith Jr.,
Present.
Dr. Frank Smith Jr., Steve Traeger,
I am here.
Dr. Don Wade, Mark Watkins,
Here.
Gary Williams, ex officio member Jeff Knoll, Secretary Jeff Knoll,
Present.
and Jeff O'Brien,
Present.
and Jeff Taylor. We have a quorum.
All right, well, thank you, everybody. So we'll get right to it. Our first item up for discussion is the recommendation for approval of a proposed budget for a 501c3 application. And I'll turn this over to Steve Traeger, the chair of the Finance Committee.
Thanks, David. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you. As David mentioned, I'm the chair of the Finance Committee, and we really appreciate you all getting together with such short notice. So, as we're going through this process, we kind of got a key date coming up here, June 30th. That's kind of our first step to get this thing off the ground and position us to do some of the good things that collaboratively we'd like to do. We've been very fortunate. I haven't been part of all the conversations. We've had some wonderful donors who have stepped up, very much want to support the West End Opportunity Partnership in a very meaningful way. As we've discussed amongst ourselves, the first thing that we have to do in order to accommodate so many of these good donors is we have to have 501c3 status. So with the good help of Frost Brown Todd, the law firm, they progress, they've got the application about complete. And one of the last remaining things for that application is that we need a budget to check this procedural box in order to file that application. So there's been some discussion. There's not a lot of tons of thought behind this budget. We've got to have something. It is not a final budget. It is very much subject to change, as I'm sure there will be as we get more into our future. But with the great help of Alicia, we kind of took what we've spent so far to date, extrapolated that out, put in there some positions that we may have in the future, and kind of took the best crack we could at coming up with something to fulfill the requirement of the 501c3 application. Obviously, this is a decision for the board to support, again, a very preliminary draft, all of which is very much subject to change. We just got to have something to submit with this application. So that's the purpose of what we've come up with. You know, we can answer some questions about it. You know, you all know as much as we do about this stuff. I think these numbers look to be as good of a guess as we can come up with based on what we hope this organization might be in and after June 30th. So that's the purpose, just to position ourselves to complete this application. Again, everything very much subject to change. And that's what we're seeking from the board today. Just the approval to include this draft budget in our 501c3 application. David, I think you're on mute.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Steve. Does anyone have any questions or additional comments about the proposed budget?
I don't have any questions, but if I'm reading it correctly, the line 32, community engagement, we've never, in each of the years, 4 years, don't allocate more than $200 a year. I don't think that speaks highly of our priorities for community engagement. And I think that should be a much higher priority and is something that's desperately needed.
What would you, do you have a figure?
Not $150.
Right. Well,
Okay.
obviously, a lot of our efforts have gone toward that. I mean, we can put whatever figure in there you all think is appropriate.
This is
I'm
Gina.
open to opening
and,
that discussion, but I don't have a number offhand. I mean, I think the budget's a little premature because we haven't identified what our priorities are. So the cart ran over the horse, but you know, here we are.
That's correct.
Thank you, Gina. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I guess I'm wondering if it would even be possible to remove or strike that line item for community engagement, because we don't know the appropriate number, because we haven't devised a strategy or assessed the needs and professional services that we'll need around that. I could even imagine hiring a staff position full-time to do nothing but community engagement. And I'm not sure if that's what's implied under some of the staff positions that are introduced to us in this budget. So that's a comment in response directly to Mr. Nagel's observation and Mr. Traeger's question. But I have lots of concerns and questions over this budget, particularly that we're all looking at the finalized version that the Finance Committee would have us to contemplate, which from what I'm looking at on this spreadsheet extrapolates out to 2025. I'm not sure why we're extrapolating beyond 2023, but there are some things that I question, primarily in the revenue section. The I guess private and public funds that are potentially being appropriated to this body. It's my understanding that that's $30 million collectively from Louisville Metro government, state government, and private grantors and donors. The way it's laid out here in these out to 2025, it implies that we're getting multiple multiple receipts from government. I mean, are we getting 30 million or are we getting 90? And have I misread the budget document?
thought it was just the seed money of 30. But I don't, is there anybody else that can answer that question?
This is Patrick at Frost Brown Todd. I think it might be helpful for multiple reasons to put the budget on screen so that we can ensure we're all talking about the same document. I don't know if you're able to do that, or you know, I have the most recent version you sent around. I'm glad to do that as well.
Please do.
Okay.
This is Alicia. I have a question while we're doing that, or a statement. So Steve, just to make sure I'm making it clear to everyone, this is a working document, correct? So this is not the final. We're asking the board for some insight on this particular document. Am I understanding, or the budget? Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah.
Patrick,
Yes.
what do we need here?
Can you see that okay?
I can.
First off, okay. So I think the question that Ms. Dunlap asked is with respect to, you know, these columns here that I'm highlighting. And it appears what you've crafted looks like, you know, we're getting income here of, on an annual basis, of $10 million each year in each category. And I don't know that that's what you contemplated, but that's what that appears to show. And I guess I just want to, from my end too, seek some clarification on that from the Finance Committee, because that those are kind of the numbers we'll need to be putting into the application.
Can anybody answer that? I thought it was just a seed money. Is that recurring?
It is not. It is not recurring. But it looks like it is on this statement. And so that's what we need to correct.
Yeah, I had following the revenue side and
Patrick, how far do we need to go out in this budget?
Yeah.
To-
So we need to go 2024. To answer Ms. Dunlap's question, just given how long the organization has been a legal entity, that's the time frame that the IRS requires in its application. So we don't necessarily need 2025 here, only through 2024. But we do need a projected amount for the full year of 22, 23, and 24, as well as the actual expenditures for 21.
So Alicia, can you eliminate 2025 and then eliminate the 30 million from 2023 and 2024?
Yes.
And then Gina, do you think the good solution for the community engagement, it is that figure doesn't, Mike, to your point, that figure doesn't represent cosmetically our commitment to community engagement, I would think. So
Yeah, I'd rather see it just striked from the preliminary budget altogether than to authorize it in its current format, which I agree is not representative of our commitment to investing in the people of the West End. A couple other comments, two major comments. With regard to these staff positions that are listed here, I feel like that is preliminary and would support removing all but the chief executive officer or president, as it's noted on here, pending, further conversation, as well as appointing or hiring an executive, because I think they would have a lot of opinions that they should be allowed some latitude to formulate what the staffing requirements should be, what their job descriptions should be, all of those things. So I'm okay with leaving in an appropriation for an executive, but I would recommend that we remove those other positions. And then sort of a broad brush question about this budget. In light of what we actually have under our control. So not grants, but the actual working capital at our disposal, which I believe the Finance Committee reports to us on a monthly basis. Given that I'm not sure that we have $250,000 to authorize and approve. I'm not sure that we've ever spent $250,000 as the actual sort of indicates. And so I would be concerned about authorizing a budget that exceeds what we readily have available as of this meeting. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, can I make a comment?
Please do.
I think we're getting a little bit hung up in jargon as to what we're actually doing.
Right.
This is in no means adopting a budget, neither is it committing the organization to an actual amount of money to be spent. This process is all about fulfilling the procedural needs of this application. It's kind of akin to filing estimated taxes at the beginning of a year or a period that you have to report to the IRS. You take an estimate of what you think is going to happen, but you are fully able to amend and adjust that estimate to comply with what actually happens down the road. The point here is we've got chicken and eggs going on. We need the 501c3 so these donors can go forward and give us the money that we need by the 30th. To do that, they will accept the fact that we have a pending application with the IRS. The application cannot go forward unless it includes these estimates of what the budget is going to be. The actual budget, the actual expenditures, the actual positions, of course, are going to have to be voted on at the board at a later date. But if we don't take some reasonable action to send forward to the IRS at this point, we're at a dead standstill. So I would not recommend that we go overboard in trying to go too far as what is actually going to happen, because we don't know yet. And it's safer to put a little more in via positions or being community engagement or any other factor than not. We can clearly amend this at any time to the IRS, but we should not look at this as this is a document that's going to commit the board to specific expenditures, because it is not. It's simply going to require a box checked off with the IRS.
That's extremely helpful. I was under the impression that we were adopting our first budget, but if that's not the case, and I see Patrick nodding his head, then that changes the tone and tenor of the entire discussion. I apologize for my misunderstanding.
Patrick, you're nodding your head.
Yeah, I agree with everything Mr. Brown said. The one I change we will make in showing this to the IRS is that we'll remove the 2025 projection and change the revenue projections that are listed here, these $10 million to zero. Of course, there will be at some point the TIF revenue, but it's unclear when that's going to happen at this point. So I think it is kind of speculative to guess what that's going to be at this stage, though, as we all understand, there will be a time for that.
All right, so let's remove those. I mean, Gina, or unless y'all object otherwise, we can just leave these positions in place. You know, nothing is committed, like Michael said. We can eliminate the community engagement if you all want to, because, you know, for all the reasons that were stated.
I mean, I think that's a reasonable compromise until we go through the process to establish what that is, because otherwise, you know, as a community member, and this will be, you know, public document, you know, it would just be kind of a slap in the face. So let's remove it.
I would rather take the position of enhancing it, even if we reduce it at a later time, just for the purpose of indicating that we have contemplated extreme actions on community development. If you send anything forward and it comes out that we didn't include it at all, I think it sends a bad message.
I can go with that too.
What's a good figure?
10,000.
I like it.
Something better than what we get.
I think that's the right figure. Are you able to do that, Patrick? Is that you doing that? All right, so with that,
Patrick, you'll need to change, yeah, the 23, 24 as well to 10,000, right? Okay.
so with that, are we good to proceed? Including this in the application?
I would just ask for clarification then, based on Mr. Brown's clarification. We are approving a financial projection. This is not, in fact, a budget. Is that correct?
I'll answer for him. This is Mark Watkins. You are absolutely correct.
Thank you.
And question for Patrick, and I'm looking over the bylaws. I assume you've read them more closely and understand them better than I. There's nothing in the bylaws that allows monies to be spent based on this projected budget, correct?
No, not as such. That there are provisions in the bylaws that we'll talk about that speak to financial expenditures, but I think we'll defer that until we get to that portion of the session. But to your question, no.
Thanks.
All right, any other discussion of the proposed document to send to the IRS for the 501c3? All right. I guess we'll vote on it. All in favor of accepting this document, please say aye.
Excuse me, sir.
I'm
Chair,
sorry.
Do we have a motion on the floor?
Oh, I'm sorry. You're right. I have a motion to use this document.
So moved.
A motion by Steve Traeger. Do we have a second?
Chris Romaine seconds.
Chris Romaine is second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, the ayes have it. Thank you. Then next we have a recap for approval of to submit the 501c3 application to the IRS. Patrick, are you there?
Yes, sir.
It's all yours.
All right, so thank you for the approval of the financial projections. That's kind of one of the last pieces we needed before moving forward with the application, which I sent to you all in PDF, or I sent to Rita, who sent it to you in PDF form last week. There is, in addition to that PDF form, we'll also be including various attachments with the application, including the enacting legislation that authorize the partnership, the bylaws, and various other things, one of which is simply a write-up of why the organization qualifies for 501c3 status under the law. That's something we're currently finalizing and should have in submission ready form here towards the end of the week. So that's kind of where things stand on the application. And it's really, you know, other than a couple of items, which I think I do want to discuss, it's really the same as what was submitted to you before. I am going to, hold on, got logged out. Hold on a second.
Chairman James, I believe we're about to go into a discussion of the IRS application, but we're also going to be deciding on amending our bylaws. Would it be appropriate to decide on the bylaws before we jump into the actual application or not? I defer to you on that, but I did want to bring that up.
It could, in my opinion, it could go either way because the application cannot go without the bylaws attached to it. So we're just talking about a form right now.
So I'm going to share with you, essentially this is the, hold on, let me share first before I start talking. This is the web page that is the application itself. I sent you a PDF. That's what the website generates for you to view, but this will be submitted online. There was one question that is changed from what was noted in your the draft that went to you, and that was based on the financial projections that were shared with us this morning. So because it seems that there may be a possibility that either one, you may compensate an officer of the organization, so an executive director, or that executive director salary may exceed a certain limit set by the IRS. We have to disclose some information on how the board and how the partnership decides on compensation issues for its employees. And it's relatively simple. Basically, all we're going to do, and this is on part 5, question 1, is we're going to change our answer to yes, that we do think it's likely that we will compensate officer. And then if you do that, there are a number of drop-down questions that generate asking if following conflict of interest policy, approve compensation arrangements in advance of paying, and so on. As the board's attorney, I will tell you, you will do all these things. And that's what we'll need to answer the questions here. Now, it will be incumbent on the board in the future to actually develop those policies, you know, what exactly they are. And that's a notation that I've entered in here that the board is going to be working on that in the future. So I would be glad to answer questions on this particular question or the responses to it, but that's how I would recommend that the board proceed on this, given the financial information that was recently shared.
Okay, do we have any questions for Patrick? Or comments? All right. Can I have a motion that we accept the application that Patrick is producing for our 501c3?
This is Jeff, so moved.
We have a motion by Jeff. Do I have a second?
This is Mark Watkins. You have second.
Second from Mark Watkins. Any more discussion?
Yes, Chair, this is Gina Dunlap from the NAACP. I know there's a number of supporting documents that will accompany this application that was listed in the draft that we received. Will we as board members have access to those attachments and enclosures?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
And in fact, not only you, Ms. Dunlap, but these documents, and the board should know this, but these documents are all publicly available under federal law. So they will be publicly available as well.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
This is Alicia. I have a question.
Okay.
Patrick, I know regarding the conflict of interest, does it have to be a separate policy when we submit the application? Or is it just because it's included in the bylaws, it's acceptable?
I believe, and I'm glad to be corrected on this, but I believe we have a pre-existing conflict of interest policy among the directors. So it may be that we need to just tweak that to make sure it speaks to compensation issues. But to your question, we do not need it active at the time of submission of the application. The question asks, will we do that? And we're just stating that, yes, we will do those things when the time comes. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed? The ayes have it. The application passes. Thank you. So next up is a recap and approval of a final draft of the amended and restated bylaws. And I think we all got that in our emails over the last 24 hours or so. Patrick, it's all you again.
All right, we'll keep going here. Now I am going to share the red line version of the bylaws. So just give me a second here. So as you can see, some of these changes were simply stylistic, correcting issues with the interim bylaws that we picked up earlier. We did add in Article 2 to the bylaws to conform to the IRS's requirements for charitable purpose and the perpetual use of the organization's assets for a charitable purpose. Also a clause restricting any political campaign or substantial legislative activity. Those are all just requirements under the Internal Revenue Code. Some other changes were just to note some issues in the law that we missed the first time around, such as recognizing our non-voting ex officio members of the board. A requirement for certain vacancies to be filled by those individuals who are statutorily required to be on the board, so our 18 to 30-year-old appointment in particular here. Again, many of these are just stylistic. Okay. And I want to get down to a couple issues that we did pop in here. Thank you for the note, Ms. Dunlap, about the committees in Article 5, since the committee's powers are there, and we didn't note that in the title. We did insert a provision about the partnership's ability to issue bonds, as that is specifically authorized under the enabling statute. That's a very general provision that just states that you have the power and that any action has to occur alongside a board resolution and must comply with relevant Kentucky law. Finally, in this section, we have a specific provision about expenditures and how those expenditures should be authorized. And this came out of a conversation I had with Rita and Interim Chair James. And this is frankly something that I think the board could debate on, but we needed a starting point here. So the first provision is that any expenditure on behalf of the organization that exceeds $1,000 in amount will need to be approved by a resolution of the board's finance committee. Secondly, there is a provision that basically seeks to separate the duties of someone incurring an expense and someone approving an expense. As a matter of good board governance and good organizational governance, you never want that to be the same person. This basically states that no individual who's incurring an expense on behalf of the board or the partnership is authorized to approve that same expense. And there could be additions here or tweaks, but those are the provisions that we've inserted for the time being, and glad to take comments or thoughts on that. I just want to make sure that I'm not missing anything else. Yes, okay. So nothing else that's substantive. So that's my talk on the bylaws.
Okay, thank you, Patrick. Does anybody have any questions, ideas, comments, thoughts on the bylaws? I see Gina shaking her head.
And my digital hand is raised. So
Okay.
So thank you, Patrick, for all the work that you've done on the bylaws. I really appreciate how you're bringing that in alignment with the IRS requirements. My major comment is with regard to how the officers are laid out in this document. But since you brought up the expenditure requirement, I would like to offer that $1,000 in the working day-to-day business is a tiny amount. I would hate for any subsequent staff to be hamstrung trying to wait for a board meeting to actually spend something over $1,000. I would suggest that be clarified to say if it is in fact outside of the budget, right? So like, I think any, major expenditures that are authorized as part of our annual and active budget, that staff or others should have latitude to make those expenditures as long as they're in line with the board's approved and authorized actual budget. And otherwise, things that come up miscellaneously, sure, maybe if they're under $1,000, it's no big deal. But even $1,000 is a very, it's a high threshold for such a small amount is what I'm suggesting. But I would definitely like the board to consider making reference to an actual approved standing budget for any given year. And then maybe think about increasing that threshold as they're comfortable, just from the experience of trying to run daily operations. The other comment or concern that I have regards how the officers are prescribed. Patrick, if you could go to the section that mentions the chair, the section that talks about the chair is not included in the section that talks about the officers. And so I just because Patrick just sent me a note to clarify my question. I thought the board chair was an officer of this board. And apparently the chair and the vice chairs are not officers of this body. I would think that the chair and vice chair should be officers of this body and included in the section on the officers. With regard to the officers that are included in Article 4, I would suggest that we not only add the chair and vice chair, but that we add, I think I had said, let's see, can you show that section, Patrick, what we have right now for required? So the president, which I believe is the same as the executive or the staff person that we hope will lead this. It's not stated in here as the executive director, but there's a president, which I assume is the person who's paid to lead the day-to-day operations, the treasurer and the secretary. I would suggest not only adding the chair and the vice chair, but adding a parliamentarian. I am a member of Delta Sigma Theta sorority, which also conducts its meetings under Robert's Rules of Order. And parliamentarians come in handy because they make, they point out when we're not following Robert's rules. And given that everybody here is not necessarily, accustomed to following the procedures of Robert's Rule, which Rita took the time out to really school us and give us some resources around, I think it would make sense for this body to also have a designated parliamentarian to guide the meetings as they're happening. And I'll take responses to that. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Gina. Could you go back and you just scroll back to the thing about the chair and vice chair? I didn't understand. It was moving and I couldn't read what you're talking about there.
Oh, the wraparound comment for all of that was that I was hoping we could also lay out in the bylaws what constitutes our executive committee. The executive committee or the existence of such thing is not listed here, but I think it would make sense to say that we have an executive committee. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I don't see where you had said that the chair and the vice chair are not members of the board. That's where I didn't see that at.
Patrick will explain this, but they're not officers. They're
Yeah.
members of the board, but I think a lot of us would have presumed that they are also officers, but
Yeah.
they're not.
I see. Okay.
Patrick schooled me on that in the email.
Yeah.
Patrick, can you school us a little bit?
Yeah, I will attempt to school you all a little bit. So basically, as a matter of general corporate and nonprofit governance, the directors, which is all of you, is the governing body of any entity. So you have a chair of the board of directors and a vice chair board of the directors. Those individuals who hold the seats are not necessarily officers, but they could. So an officer, in contrast, are the folks who are actually charged with, operating either the company or the nonprofit organization. As Ms. Dunlap mentioned, the president or executive director generally being the person who heads up the organization on a day-to-day basis. And so some boards, have a member on the board of directors who is both a director and an officer, but it doesn't have to be that way. So just kind of think of them as separate shoes to fill, and they can be filled by the same person if the board so chooses.
Gotcha. Thank you. Does anybody have any thoughts or comments about anything that Gina just spoke about?
I think this is Desmond Smith, Algonquin Parkway.
Okay.
I was just thinking, I would like for them to be separate entities, two separate. Just think it'll be better.
Okay, you'd like them to be separate? I got you. Thank you. Anybody else?
I liked everything she said, especially about the approval of the budget and but we should wait and add that until after we have our 501c3 so that we're not contingent to the budget we just approved.
Okay. Any other comments?
All right, so let me just go back for a second. Maybe the best way to do this would be, I'm going to break these two things down separately, if that's okay with you, Gina. Okay. So Gina's first recommendation was that the chair and the vice chair, and if I say this wrong, please correct me. The chair and the vice chair be considered a part of the board of directors. Is that accurate? No? Okay. Tell me what, please restate that.
That the chair and the vice chair would be considered officers of the board with responsibilities and some level of accountability.
As in an executive board. Is that accurate?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So is that in the form of a motion for a change to the bylaws?
I would move that the chair and the co-chairs be included as officers of the board and revised into this draft amended bylaw.
Okay. And do we have a second?
I second.
Who said that? I didn't catch that.
Alicia Burns, Shawnee.
All right. Thank you, Alicia. And any further discussion on this motion?
I think if you do that, you have to include a provision that they're non-compensated.
Good point. Is that a friendly amendment, Gina? Can you consider that as a friendly amendment?
Well, I have a clarifying question. So when we talk about the treasurers and the secretaries, are those officers compensated?
They don't have to be.
I was only getting at, well, I would like a clear distinction between the board members, officers are not being compensated as opposed to staff, even if a staff member is elevated to the board level.
So Patrick, what are we saying here currently in this draft about the president, the secretary, and the treasurer?
Simply that they are officers of the partnership. So you said officers of the board, but it's really not of the board, it's of the partnership.
Thank you. Yes.
And so that would be my friendly amendment. Not that I can make one, but I'd entertain someone to make that on my behalf. And this simply outlines the duties that they have. So officers could certainly attend board meetings as the secretary, has to do to keep minutes. But they could be members of the board, but they don't have to be. If that makes sense. I know it's a little tricky and can be a difficult little legal concept, but I think to Mr. Brown's point, we do want to make clear, if we're saying you don't want the chair and vice chair to be compensated, certainly that's something that can be put in the bylaws.
So have we stated explicitly that the treasurer and the secretary are compensated or not compensated?
We have not, I don't believe.
This is Chris Romaine. I thought when we were looking at the application, that section 5 is where we actually stated that they would be compensated.
That is, so that asks about all officers, directors, or certain employees. So why we changed the answer to that was because of the financial projections that showed that we were going to have an officer, i.e. the executive director, who would be compensated. And we didn't know that prior to that coming out this morning. When I say we, I mean the firm. So that's why we changed that.
All right, I only have one other comment to that. In the statute related to the creation of the West End Opportunity Partnership, it specifically states none of the board members can be compensated.
Yeah, Chairman James, I was going to bring that up, but I just wanted the conversation to go through. That's legislated in there that there's no board members can be paid or other than reimbursement for something like, if they bought some supplies for the partnership or for the office, they can get reimbursed for that. But other than that, they cannot be paid according to the legislation.
So no directors of the partnership are paid by statute. So I'm not sure if Mr. Brown's friendly amendment is necessary if we're relying on the statutory outline that we have. But to take that a step further, is it fair to presume that the treasurer and the secretary will be, those seats, those officer positions would be occupied by non-compensated directors?
That they could very well be. That would be an efficient way to do things. And maybe let me make this suggestion. You could include a simple provision in the director's article that says no members of the board of directors shall be compensated as required under applicable Kentucky law. And then a notation in the officers section stating that to the extent a member of the board of directors occupies a position as an officer, he or she shall not be compensated for their services as such.
I like that and would like to adopt that as part of my motion. But I am standing by moving that the chair and vice chair be included as officers, albeit unpaid directors in that capacity. Chairman, should I continue on with adding the parliamentarian in this particular motion?
No, let's keep them separate.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So we are still under discussion of Gina's proposed change to the bylaws as it relates to directors, chair and vice, or president, and what is it?
Chair and vice chair.
Chair and vice chair. Any further discussion?
So are we still discussing compensation? I'm a little off track.
No, the compensation is dealt with through the state statute.
Okay, there's some bylaws referring to compensation of board members, and I'll bring those up separately.
Okay.
Though I think we did have an incorporation in Gina's motion to include a provision with respect to the compensation of directors, that there would be none, and that any officer who's also a director would not service.
Correct. That is correct. Michael, does that answer? Was that what you were talking about?
There's a section 7.6A that I think would need changes to meet the state statute.
Sorry, I'm just reading that right now, Michael. As I read this, I don't think it violates the state statute. I think it's probably superfluous, but in my view, it's probably good to keep in there anyway, sort of as a belts and suspenders sort of approach, because it simply provides that to the extent anyone was paid, which we know can't occur under state law, there are some conflict of interest requirements that the bylaws would bring into force. And that's just kind of a standard provision for any corporate or nonprofit bylaw.
I mean, I'm fine with that to hear you say it, so.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion on Gina's proposal? Or amendment to the bylaws, I'm sorry. All right. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you. And then the second part of that, Gina, was about parliamentarian. So please make a motion as it relates to parliamentarian.
I move that we include an officer's role dedicated to serving as the parliamentarian among our total number of officers.
Okay, that was your motion. Do we have a second?
Dr. Milliner, California, a second.
Thank you, Dr. Milliner. Now we're open for discussion. Any thoughts, ideas?
I think, it's a much lesser burden to be a parliamentarian than any of the other officers that we've indicated. But, as we're trying to follow Robert's rules and follow proper procedure, or even President James, in your role as council member, I see what the county attorney often does in your meetings is point out where the council is not following its own rules and procedures, right? So they're kind of functioning in the role of what I would call a parliamentarian. And I'm just merely suggesting, because the members of this board have very varied experience, and may be operating in this sort of quasi-public realm for the first time, that it might be helpful to have somebody who's studied and willing to serve that role for our body.
I totally agree with you. I often turn to the county attorney and say, what say ye?
Yeah, can we do this?
Right. All right. I hear no other discussion. I don't see any hands up. All in favor of this amendment to the bylaws, please say aye.
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 All opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you. Gina, was there another one or was there just two?
Just the executive committee to write it into existence.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, so.
Were there anybody else that had any other adjustments to the bylaws? Okay, well, the amended bylaws are before us. May I have a motion to pass the amended bylaws?
This is Chris Romaine. I move that we approve the amended bylaws.
All right, thank you, Chris.
I second.
And may I get a second?
Gina seconds.
Gina, your second. Any other discussion for the bylaws? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All opposed? The ayes have it. The amended bylaws have passed. Congratulations. I do need to say that I made a mistake in the one we just did prior to that is related to the application. After thinking about it, the motioner and the second, I believe, are ex officio members. So I need actual board members to make those motions, please. So I'm bringing that back up so that we can actually do it the correct way. And so I need a motion for reconsideration by somebody.
Motion for reconsideration of the previous motion. Is that how it needs to be worded?
Yes, that's it. Yes, sir.
I make a motion to reconsider the previous motion for the 501c3 application.
Thank you. May I have a second?
It's Alicia Burns, I second.
Chris,
Thank you. All in favor of the reconsideration, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right. Thank you, everybody. The application is before us that Patrick has so greatly explained to us. I need 2 board members to please make motions in second so we can pass that.
Steve Traeger, so moved.
All right, Steve Traeger, and I think I heard her. Who did I hear as a second?
This is Mark
Chris
Watkins.
Romaine, second.
Yep.
Steve Romaine is second. All right. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
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 All right, thank you, everybody. Now we're making progress. Next, we have approval of the WEOP bank account. And Steve Traeger, the floor is yours.
So as Chair of the Finance Committee and Executive Chair of Republic Bank, this is a very difficult task. I will not recommend Republic Bank because I want to avoid any appearance of a conflict of interest. So I've gone out, I've talked to 2 banks that would have interested that are local banks, Stockyard and Limestone, both of which I would be comfortable with, since I don't feel comfortable recommending Republic Bank due to the conflict of interest. So I open up to the board to choose one of those. Obviously, we need a bank account because we want these funds that folks are so good to contribute to us to go into a bank account that's entitled West End Opportunity Partnership.
All right, thank you, Steve. So Steve has made a motion. Can I have a second for that motion, please?
Did he say either or?
He said either or.
Mm,
Give it a second for the motion, please.
but
Feel free to recommend.
Say that again.
If it's an either or, I'm certainly good with that.
How about we'll get to that once we get the motion so we can do it under discussion. Everybody good? I just need a second.
Second.
Second, thank you. Now we're open for discussion. What are your thoughts?
President James, I mean, I think Steve, you just said Steve made the motion and then he just seconded his own motion.
I don't think Steve's, did he second it?
yeah,
Okay,
Yeah,
I'm
he
sorry.
did.
All right. So Steve can't second his own motion. I need a second from somebody other than Steve.
This is Mark Watkins, I second.
Thank you, Mark. Now the motion is before us. Is there any discussion?
and I think
Chris.
it's an excellent option.
Michael, go ahead. I think you were speaking.
No, I didn't understand what the other Michael just said. I mean, my only comment would be the Finance Committee feels very strongly that it needs to be a local bank where we can have direct contact with the chief executives here in Jefferson County and not reach out across state lines or anyplace else.
Okay, thank you. And I think Michael Nagel also were you getting ready to speak, sir?
Yeah, I think Stockyards is an excellent choice.
All right. And I thought I heard Mr. Romaine's also speaking. Is that accurate?
Yes, I was just wondering if there was any minority banks that we could look at locally, but I don't know if we actually have any in the city.
And I don't either. Steve, do you know?
I don't think we do.
There was it Metro Bank? But I'm pretty sure they were acquired.
Yeah, they were acquired. They're not
By Liberty.
anymore.
I'm not sure what Steve just said, but Liberty Bank did acquire Metro Bank and does hold accounts. But I'm not sure. I didn't catch the last thing you said, Steve.
They are not local anymore. Liberty.
But they are led by African Americans.
That is correct. So I'm open to that suggestion.
Okay, any other comments? So this is what I've heard. I think I've heard, if somebody would please straighten me out, that I'm more than willing to hear that. I think we have a motion for Stockyards or Limestone, but I think I also heard someone say we should choose Republic Bank. And then I've also heard someone speak about Liberty. Is that, anyone disagree with any of that?
I'll just,
I didn't hear.
we're not going to choose Republic. I
Right.
like that if somebody suggested that.
Okay. So what I'm hearing Steve say is, please don't choose Republic. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay. Is everybody okay with that?
Yes.
All right. So that leaves us with Stockyards, Limestone, and the third one that someone threw out during this discussion was Liberty. I'm thinking maybe the best way to do this is to say to the motioner, I think Steve was the motioner for the two, if you would amend yours to include Liberty. And then we could have all three up for a vote amongst everybody, or how's that sound, everybody? Who gets the highest votes?
Do the Liberty and Limestone have West End locations?
I do not know.
I was gonna ask the same thing. This is Gabe from Russell.
Okay, thanks, Steve. Steve, do you know about the answer to that?
I don't think Limestone does. I think if Liberty kept the Metro Bank location, they would, but I assume they do, but I can't say for sure.
I do believe that they are in the same location on, what is it, like 13th Street or something?
13th Street, that's correct.
And then the question for me is, does Stockyards Bank have West End locations?
They have one inside of Kroger.
Yeah, on 28.
We don't know how long that's gonna be there.
All right. Did that answer all the questions? So now we're back to the original. Steve, would you agree to modify your motion to include Liberty?
Yes.
Thank you. And I think it was Steve Romains that seconded. Would you agree to that modification? Chris Romains, I'm sorry.
Yes, I agree.
Okay, thank you. So we have Liberty.
Mark Watkins was the second on that.
Oh, Mark, I'm sorry. Mark,
On the
would you agree
original,
to that?
yes.
Thanks for keeping me straight. Mark, would you agree to that?
Yes, I agree to that.
Thank you. All right. So before us, we have three banks: Liberty, Stockyard, and Limestone. So I'm going to name them in that order. And if I could, and Rita, I'm going to need your help keeping track. If I could hear your name called out, if you support that particular bank that I call out, that'll help me keep track of voting. And so we're going to start with Stockyards, and maybe we'll do it this way. Rita, if you could call the roll and let each person say the name of the bank that they support, that would be better. Okay.
I have a question before we do
Yes.
that.
Thank you.
I'm familiar with Stockyard, I'm familiar with Limestone, but I'm not much familiar with Liberty Bank. So I would, if at all possible, before we vote, can we get some insight on Liberty Bank? And what have they done for the community thus far? Just to make sure that I make a good decision.
Correct.
I don't have that information. Steve or Gina, are you all familiar enough to provide that information?
You know, I mean, it's hard for me to advocate on behalf of any other bank, but you know, I will say that when we put together the financing package for the Norton Sports and Learning Center, the Urban League track, Liberty stepped up big time to help, and Stockyards did as well, and also Limestone to a proportionately appropriate but lesser extent, you know, they all participated nicely in that loan, all three of them. And Liberty is African-American owned.
Well, it used to be, right?
It's, I mean, it still is.
Yes, okay.
Louisiana, unless something changed in the last year. You know, Metro Bank sold to Liberty sometime.
Oh, I got you. Okay.
Thank you for that, Steve. Does anybody else have any insights into those three banks before we call this roll?
Chairman, I'm actually on the Liberty Bank website in the About section. I can share my screen if it pleases the board, but they've got a list of their executive team members as well as their history. I think they've been in business 40 odd years, or there's even a 1 minute 34-second video that we could watch. But the thing I know about them is that they are one of the larger community development finance institutions. So they're just not, you know, a corporate commercial bank, but they are also a well-known CDFI that participates in deals like Steve mentioned to finance community development projects and investments. So I think what they would bring to the table, even though it's not local, they're not, you know, hyper local. They are new to the area, but well versed in matters that might align with some of the actions that this board decides to take in the future.
Okay, thank you. Any other thoughts before we do that? All right, Rita, call the roll.
Okay. J. Michael Brown.
Stockyards. I'm very, very strongly in favor of people that we can walk across the street and talk to, and not in Louisiana.
Alicia Burns.
Stockyard.
Gina Dunlap.
Stockyards.
Jennifer Hancock.
Stockyards.
Tammy Hawkins.
Stockyard.
Von Holt is not with us. David James.
Stockyards.
Dr. Gabe Jones.
Stockyard.
David Kaplan, not with us. Dr. Mary Milliner.
Stockyards.
Michael Nagel.
Stockyards.
Christopher Romaine.
Liberty.
Desmond Smith Jr.
Liberty.
Dr. Frank Smith, not with us. Steve Traeger.
Chicken out and abstain.
Okay, understood. Dr. Don Wade is not with us. Mark Watkins.
Stockyard.
And let's see. Gary Williams is not with us, and that covers everybody. So we have
As the chair of the finance committee, my math says Stockyards is the winner.
9 for Stockyards, it looks like, and 2 for Liberty. No, 10 for Stockyard, 2 for Liberty, and 1 abstention.
All right, thank you. So it looks like we'll choose Stockyards.
Wait a minute, let me hang on, hold on. I think it might be 11. Hang on. 1, 2. No, it's 10. That's correct. 10.
All right, thank you. Stockyards will be the bank. thanks for Steve and Finance Committee for the work on that. That really helps a lot. Next item for discussion is board officers and nomination committee. So when we all first got assembled, which seems like a long time ago, we selected interim chair and vice chair for this, me being the chair and Gina being the vice chair. And we always had said that we would do this until we got everybody else on board. So now we have everybody else on board. And so I think that it's important that we stick to what we talked about. And so I want to try to have the board vote on, and in July, I'm thinking, who the permanent chair and vice chairs will be, and secretary and treasurer and parliamentarian, that whole thing.
Chair, can I have a point of order?
Sure.
I'm looking at the agenda
Mm-hmm.
for today, and I guess what is included in the votes that we lined up, and I don't see any discussion about electing officers, which is what I think you're about to go into.
No, I'm going to discuss that I'm appointing an ad hoc nomination committee.
Got it. Thank you.
Yep. And so I'm going to appoint a nominating committee to do that, an ad hoc nominating committee to work on that for us. And Mark Watkins has volunteered to be the chair of that committee. I'm appointing Dr. Jones, Jennifer Hancock, Gary Williams, and Christopher Romaine to that committee. And my charge to you all is that we just completed our bylaws, and we've got the names of those officers in there that need to fill that. And we're asking you to come up with how we do that. I'm also asking you, do not consider me to be the chair. All right. And so
give me those names again, please. Give me those
okay,
names again, please.
Sure. Mark Watkins as the chair of that committee. Dr. Gabe Jones, Jr. as a member. Jennifer Hancock as a member. Gary Williams as a member. Christopher Romaine as a member.
Okay, got him. Thank you.
All right. Then next.
Hey, David.
Yes.
I'd like to state for the record that if I'm going to be chair, you guys aren't going to hear from me this week at all. I got so much stuff going on. So.
All right, I got it. No worries. Thank you. Next, at this time, I move that the board proceed to a closed session pursuant to KRS 61.810, Section 1, subsection F, to discuss a personnel issue. Can I get a motion and a second, please?
This is Chris Romaine. Motion that we move to.
Thank you, Chris. And I need a second, please.
This is Dr. Mary Milliner, California. A second.
Thank you, Dr. Milliner. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. All right. So Rita, how do we do that with Zoom?
Okay, yes, the way that this has to happen, because we're on a webinar and not in a Zoom meeting. All of the panelists, you sit tight, all the board people, all the attendees, I'm going to need you all to log out. We're going in closed session. When we come back into the public, there's 23 of you all. When we come back in, you will receive an email distribution to indicate that you can log back in should you desire to do so.
Okay,
So I need
Rita,
you guys to, pardon me?
Rita, are you telling us to log out? Or are you telling
No, you all sit tight. There's
Okay.
17 panelists. You all stay there because you're on the board. But the attendees, there's 18 of them. And I need you all to log out, or I could log you out. If I log you out, if I remove you, you won't be able to log back in. So it's better for you to log yourself out. There's 18 of you. If you all would please be so kind to log out at this time.
Rita and the board, do you want me to be in or log out?
That's a David call. He stepped away. Hang on, Patrick. Okay, I still have 11 people who need to log out, please. Thank you. Nine people I need you to log out. 7. If I log you out, if I have to log you out, you will not be able to log back in. So if
Hello?
you remove. Okay, there's 7 people left. I'm gonna start logging you out myself.
Patrick, I
Last
want you
chance.
to stay.
You
Will
want
do.
Patrick to stay?
Yes.
Okay, I'm getting ready to, okay, there's 5. Lisa, I need you to log out. Bruce, because if I remove you, you won't be able to log back in should you want to. Okay. Bruce, I'm removing you now. You won't be able to log back. Oh, there's 4. You won't be able to log back in. Crystal Jones, if I remove you now, you won't be able to log back in. Okay, hang on. I have 3 more people to remove. One more. Okay. All right. We are clear and Ms. Laura Douglas has joined us. You all forgive me for my allergies. I said it at the top of the meeting. My voice is not my own today. So David.
Okay.
President,
you.
President,
Yes.
so I see 2 names on my screen that don't appear to be board members. And so
Show me.
So Laura Adams.
That's
Okay.
with Jennifer Hancock. That's Jennifer Hancock.
Thank you, Rita. Thank you.
Yeah, that's okay. That's Jennifer. That's through her assistant because her link would not work on hers. Who's the other one, Gina?
Well, Miss Douglas.
No,
Yeah.
she's in the meeting.
But we're in closed session and
Yeah.
yeah, so
So take Laura out for a minute. I need to talk to the board members.
Okay. All right, Laura, that's my bag. If you would sign out for a minute and then I'm gonna have you sign back in.
I am having some difficulty.
I'll send you a new link.
With audio. I may try to log on from my phone.
Okay, I'm gonna send you a new link. So if you log off here, then I'll send you a new link. And my apologies, David. I was trying to time it to have her log in.
Okay.
Okay. All right.
This is Gabe. I also just have a quick question. Am I correct in assuming that the recording of this closed session will be separate?
It will be paused. We will not be recording. Thank you, Dr. Gabe. We do not record in closed session. So I'm
Read it from the screen that we see. We don't see who's.
yeah, I sent the email to the full distribution list for people who were on, so they all have it. Should they
Okay.
decide to get back on?
Can you let us know when some get back on?
Yeah, at least somebody gets on, right? One person got back on, Muriel Gardner. 2, They're starting to come in now.
Okay.
Four persons who have joined back. 5. They're coming on. Before we went into closed session, there were about, I think, 17 or 18 people. There's
Okay.
5 who have joined back.
Okay.
Five is the number right now.
All right. Well, we'll go ahead and get started. So while we were in closed session pursuant to KRS 61.815, Section 1, subsection C, no final actions were taken during that closed session. It was a closed session to discuss some personnel matters, a personnel matter. I think that's really it. Does anybody have anything else they wish to talk about? All right, nothing else to discuss. We will see everybody at our regular June meeting, and it was good seeing everybody, and I'll talk to you all then. Take care.
We need to formally adjourn.
Oh, I'm sorry. Need a motion to adjourn.
So moved, Mike Nagel.
Mike, thank you. Second,
Chris Romaine, second.
Chris Romaine, second. Got it. Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right.
Hi.
All opposed? Guys have it. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.